If you ever feel uncomfortable when conversations turn to topics related to racial injustice, privilege, bias, inequities, or other such topics, you are not alone. Many people find these conversations to be difficult and sometimes awkward or even hazardous to friendships. Regardless of the conversation topic, it's not comfortable to reflect on and confront our own biases, but these issues are all too real for our students. Many of our students live with the evidence of racial injustice front and center every day. For this reason, it's important that we learn to effectively facilitate and participate in these conversations in the classroom. As teachers, we must model an openness to learning more about the crucial components of having these tough discussions while modeling an understanding and acceptance of our own truth. Having these difficult conversations starts the healing process and leads to making a positive difference in our communities. In this module, we discuss the crucial role that educators play in helping others talk openly about the historical roots and contemporary manifestation of social inequality and discrimination. Throughout this discussion, we'll keep in mind that learning how to have these conversations via video conferencing takes practice, courage, and special skills. To start, it may be helpful to think about this quote from Alexander Solzhenitsyn. In keeping silent about evil and burying it so deep within us that no sign of it appears on the surface, we are implanting it, and it will rise up 1,000-fold in the future. When we neither punish nor reproach evildoers, we are not simply protecting their trivial old age. We are thereby ripping the foundations of justice from beneath new generations. Considering this, it might be reasonable to ask, at what age are students old enough to have conversations on race? Of course, the language we use and how we talk to students is dependent upon their ability to understand, but the evidence is clear that conversations about race can be appropriate at any age. In fact, research shows that by a very early age, race becomes an issue that children notice. The earlier we can begin conversations on race, the better students will be in terms of respecting the perspectives of others.
I'm a student in my classes, in any of my classes, we don't talk about what's going on. And I feel like if our teacher doesn't touch on it, we have to step up as a student and maybe ask, could we talk about it for a second? Because I don't feel like it's touched on enough in schools, and we just have to be the voice if our teachers are not going to be, we gotta see what we feel. Our teachers wonder sometimes, why aren't we talking in class, or why aren't our cameras on? Maybe it's because of what we found out yesterday or the day before that. They don't ask about how we're feeling or any of that. They just, why aren't y'all talking? Well, maybe you should ask, what do y'all want to talk about today instead of following the book? We can skip a day. It doesn't hurt anything. It's not going to hurt our grades or anything. I just think we need to bring it up more.
Thankfully, I had a couple teachers, after the announcement of the decision of the local investigation of the Breonna Taylor case, they allowed us to talk about it in class. And I only had one teacher do that, but all of my other teachers are kind of moving on. And it's I don't know if they're trying to, because it is traumatizing for people of color and Black people to have to retell or relive whatever story or experience of oppression or traumatic event they experienced. It is traumatizing to have to constantly retell that story, but when you're not given the space to at least talk about it once, then you're bottling it up and you don't tell anybody how you're feeling, and all of a sudden it's you break down. And I was able to, thankfully in my theater class, my teacher gave me the space to express what I was feeling, and I felt a little better that I was able to get it off my chest, because all the rest of my classes of that day, that was my last class of the day, the rest of my classes didn't say a single word about it. And I wasn't sure how I felt. But I'm thankful that I go to a school that there are people that are open to the conversation, and there are teachers that care, and it's an environment that we can all talk about it without necessarily having to worry about backlash, I guess.
And I think what you said about the comfort level is also really important, because as a white educator, a Black student may not want to talk about their racial trauma with me because I represent the oppressor. And so I think as educators, we have to acknowledge that and give a safe space for that. So it's not forcing kids to talk about it if they don't want to, because they may not feel safe discussing it with me. Right. And that's okay. Having to say, you don't have to discuss this with me, just like your boys may not want to discuss that, and it's okay. But I want to lay it out there for you just in case you do.
I would add on too that I think from an educator standpoint, we have a responsibility with the conversations that we have with our students and young people about things that are happening, right now in our society. A lot of things that we see as a microcosm of, things that have been going on for, a very, very long time. But you have, people that, due to different varying reasons, are more likely want to speak out and talk about things, whether that's in a positive way or a negative way. And, as someone that, teaches smaller kids, at the elementary level, a lot of our students are exposed to different things at an early age. And the one issue can be misinformation that they may or may not receive, whether that's from social media, whether that's from conversations that they have with each other, or family members or extended individuals to them. And so I think sometimes we do a disservice because kids are exposed to different things and they hear these things, but they're maybe not being taught what does this mean? And so they're being left to their own devices to try to come up with how should I respond to that.
I can't imagine being a parent and having to deal with that on a friendship level. But it makes me think about our students that come into the building and they don't get to choose their teacher. They can't unfriend their teacher. And so when they've had that, when their teacher has that overt or racism, biases that they aren't checking, that's my concern. Like, what happens to those children? They don't get to unfollow them and be done with them. What are the long-term impacts of that?
I think the students want to talk, but it has to be a comfortable space where they feel, comfortable and safe, psychologically safe enough to have that conversation. And so when I talk to the staff, I tell them it's not your turn to talk. Let our students share. It's a lot going on right now, right? Just in Louisville, it's a lot going on. And I think some of our students don't feel safe enough to talk to the educator that's in front of them. And that's very important, because if you don't feel connected to the teacher, you're not going to feel comfortable with that teacher, right? And so I think I know they want to talk. I know they want to have that discussion. But one, I feel like some of them are not comfortable. And two, some of our educators already come with their own opinions to the screen. They come with their own opinion. So I think it's, one of those, should I say something? Can I say something without him or her having that opinion or that, aggression towards me?
These perspectives are helpful in considering that we cannot ever totally put ourselves in others' shoes. We have to listen and to respect where others come from. Let's start with what it means to have respect for others' perceptions on race and racial injustice. When we speak of respect, it means that we recognize the validity of others' perspectives, regardless of whether we can fully understand their lived experiences. Respect involves an openness and willingness to listen and to engage in a meaningful dialogue. Only through this open and honest process can we hope to reach a mutual understanding of one another's perspectives. It may be helpful to think of these conversations as much larger than any of our personal experiences. Racism extends far beyond individuals, encompassing years of both individual and community experience and institutionalized policies and practices. Let's dig into how these conversations can be facilitated by teachers. As a first consideration, we as adults must check our position and privilege. This means we must forfeit our own standing and authority to allow the students to actively and openly voice their feelings. Of course, this doesn't mean that the teacher does not still maintain authority over the classroom. It just means that in the context of the discussion, the adult is willing to relinquish direction of the conversation to the students. Another way of thinking about this is that we want to deflate our own position and elevate the students.
White people are the ones with privilege. I think we can all acknowledge that. I think they just think that when they hear, oh, you have white privilege or something, that people are saying their life wasn't hard. And I feel like what privilege means is like your life hasn't been made hard because of your skin color. So you can still have struggled in your life, but it never had anything to do with your skin color. You haven't had to fear because of your skin color. But other people have. So it's just like, I feel like some people mix up, like some people just get mad when they say they have white privilege, but it's like clearly that they do.
There are a lot of different types of privilege. You have privilege based on race, sexuality, sexual orientation, economic status, so straight people definitely have more privilege than someone who is LGBTQ+. And it just depends on the situation, right? So, white privilege would be privilege based on race because, yes, you could be, and I'm not taking anything away from anyone who is on the lower end of the economic triangle, I guess. But people are, I think, more likely to be sympathetic for someone who is white and poor than for someone who is Black and poor.
A second consideration for the effective facilitations of these discussions is thinking about how we can be fully present, actively listening and considering as others speak, and encouraging others to do likewise. Students need to see us as fully engaged and giving respect to others' opinions. Not only is our full attention a necessary component of an effective conversation, it sets a model for students, showing that we are serious and intent on hearing what others have to say.
My school has sent out a couple of emails talking about what's going on and things you can do to help and get involved. And a lot of almost all the teachers in my school went to a protest not too long ago. But I go to a very academically valued school, so they don't necessarily like getting off track of what they were originally planning to do, and they don't like getting off course or anything.
And even though we're not in a traditional classroom setting, our teachers, at least my teachers, are still talking about it and having an open discussion. And the teachers are always asking questions. Where I go to school, there are kids all over Jefferson County, and they're all from different neighborhoods. And so my teacher wants to, at least some of my teachers want it to be a safe space for everybody. So bringing up those topics in the classroom, even though we're not in the classroom, that's exposing me to different ideas of what people are thinking.
I would say the school I'm going to is just strictly virtual. So teachers are kind of just going off the book. They're really not real world stuff. So they're just teaching us the stuff that they've been told to teach, and then they're letting us go. So there really hasn't, I just realized there's really been no talk about what's going on. And hearing what you've been saying, I just realized there's none of that.
The third consideration is to make sure that our conversations don't talk around the problem, but we directly address it. Nor can we put the majority of the burden on students of color or force the students of color to be the only respondents. This is a difficult balance to maintain, that all voices are not only heard but valued in these discussions. So, reflect on your classroom and set parameters for these discussions prior to engaging in one. Students who see this open discussion modeled and realize that their opinion is valued will be far more likely to participate. Invalidation is a form of microaggression in which statements that are meant to be helpful actually serve to invalidate the real issues faced by people of color. For example, pointing out a black student who is doing well can have a negative effect if the acknowledgement is not worded properly. It can give the notion that black people are less likely to be successful. An example would be a teacher saying, "Wow, I can't believe you're really good at science," as opposed to saying, "Well done, Ibram, you are at the top of the class." Likewise, blaming problems on poverty or defaulting to mental health issues actually minimizes the real issues related to systemic racism. For example, statements like, "You just don't know any better," or "You only act that way because your daddy was gone and your mother didn't raise you right," have the effect of accentuating negative stereotypes. Clearly, the intersection of the teacher's role in leading the classroom and facilitating honest conversations in a democratic but authoritarian manner may seem rather contradictory. While these three considerations are essential, here are 5 strategies for facilitating authentic conversation. First, it's critical that we not consider our own lived experiences as the benchmark by which others' perspectives are judged. Remember, everyone has their own reality, a reality of which we very well have no perspective. We must consider all experiences and the feelings associated with them to be equally relevant. Second, it is still the teacher's job to create a safe learning environment, and part of this involves establishing group norms. But these norms are not for the purpose of maintaining comfort for the privileged. Rather, group norms should provide agreements about respecting other perspectives and genuine listening, while considering that we cannot fully put ourselves in others' shoes. Third, recognize that it is human nature to hold biases. We become jealous when we do not get what we want and blame others for our misfortunes. Problems occur when we do not actively work against rooting out injustices. Remember, implicit biases are learned and can be unlearned only if we are aware of them and consistently work to rise above. As teachers, it is still our job to make sure that students have the information necessary to contextualize racism and its roots. We must look to the research and present facts for students to discuss. This means we must read, consider, and be fluent with the research as it is related to the causes and effects of racism. Fifth, the teacher's role is not to dictate or teach solutions. Instead, the teacher should ask students to engage in critical thinking practices and become innovators of their own solutions. Furthermore, it is important in this process to help students describe their own ideas, asking them to detail why and how their proposed solutions might be effective. The process is as important as the outcomes when engaging in these discussions.
Teachers have like an extra second in class, so they can use the whole class to talk about the situation. And I feel like it needs to be more, not forced on students, but more like pushed towards students to understand what's going on. And if there's certain people who don't want to, learn about it or talk about it, they should be able to leave. But if you have like an extra second or minute or so in class, we should be able to talk about what's going on. And the teacher should really see how everybody's feeling, no matter if they're feeling happy, sad, just, making sure that the student's okay.
The teacher should build an environment where no student should feel ashamed for who they are, whether it be like sexual orientation, race. Like at the end of the day, you don't really choose who you are. Whether you're white, you don't choose that. You don't choose like your economic status, your race, you're black, white, Asian, Mexican, Hispanic, whatever. Nobody chooses anything. And I think recognizing that is really important. And understanding that you are going to have a lot of different students from different places, it's really important to address those things and keep in mind that like everybody should have an environment where they feel that they can be themselves, no matter what.
I feel like schools should teach kids about real life, like jobs, because I know kids get out of school and they don't know a thing about doing an application. They don't know how to fill out a W-2. And not everyone has a parent to teach them. They don't have people in their life. So I feel like schools should teach kids how to do real life things so that we're prepared for life, because drilling us with I know we have to know math and stuff, but they drill us with all of this school stuff instead of real world things. So a lot of people struggle.
Finally, there are 4 potential distractors that should be avoided as a part of this conversation. 1, do not allow the conversations to divert from the topic of race. While other important issues may arise, moving the focus may serve only to invalidate or delegitimize the issues associated with racism. 2, don't be defensive or feel like you are being attacked when there is a disagreement. Everyone's perspective is valid and legitimate, and this must be respected. 3, avoid silencing history by invoking stories that have been written from a privileged perspective. Acknowledge that these stories do not reflect all sides of the narrative. And 4, avoid using language that is coded to sway public opinion. For example, don't use microaggression terms like riots to describe protests or referring only to Black people as thugs. Finally, we need to consider the feelings of our students during these important conversations. Dialogues on race can be awkward and uncomfortable, but this discomfort is a healthy part of the process. Sometimes the discussion may need to focus on why the conversation has become uncomfortable. Overall, we must remind students that the purpose of the conversation outweighs any discomfort caused. As educators, we may only cue in on a group of students to understand the mood of the classroom.
One of my favorite parts of teaching like high school students is that they are in that time that they're questioning like everything, questioning themselves, questioning their parents. So they are questioning their teachers. So they're wanting to have these conversations and they're wanting to push back, but there's so much inner turmoil. Like my Black students are facing racial trauma and they're seeing what's going on and they're seeing the reactions. But then my white students are also battling with like, I have these feelings but my parents feel another way. So I can't really, like, how do I go about expressing that and challenging my parents, like truly challenging my parents, not just like I stayed out past bedtime or like, I left a sip of milk in the jug or whatever, but truly challenging their beliefs and their family traditions and their values. It's really cool to see, but it's heartbreaking to see that they have to go through that, and to see that they're struggling with that. But it's also powerful as a teacher because I got into teaching and got into teaching social studies to teach little activists, and to produce that is as selfish as it sounds, to produce little activists and to hopefully, ideally, make the future better for themselves and the future after that.
I still have microaggressions that I deal with as an adult that will take me back, and it's just kind of like playing second to like a white female. I remember that my whole life growing up. And so sometimes I have to check myself, even in education, with my white counterparts as my teachers. They're not always fighting against me or wanting my spot, but because I experienced that so much growing up, I immediately, sometimes when I see white females, I'm like, oh, I gotta step my game up because, and that just, that's me speaking in my truth.
I teach older students, obviously, teach high schoolers, and so many people are like, well, what if they like fight and they argue? And I'm like, well, what if they fight and they argue? Like, that's part of it, but it's not going to get to that because my students, we come from a place of respecting each other, and it's not going to get to that level, but you have to set the stage for that, and you have to set the tone for that. If you don't have a classroom that's based on respect and listening to each other, it's not going to happen. But as teachers, we have to do the labor to set that stage and to lay that platform out so they can have those conversations, because we're doing that disservice to them by not, because it's on us to kind of flip the classroom, and we have to give a lot of power away, which is really hard. And I say that as a person that likes to have control of my classroom. So this is my 3rd year teaching. So it's been a process for me letting go of control, and from the what I learned, the way I learned, and then the way I learned to teach is very different from the way that I probably actually teach. It's very, very different. But you have to, or I had to learn to live. I'm learning to let go of control, and my students are respecting that, and they're open to that.
You have to be open too, I think, sometimes to put content down Sometimes you gotta be willing to put content to the side to feel like
Yes.
what's going on
Yes.
with the world.
Yes.
I even remember when Breonna Taylor's the decision came out. I put content. I don't care. Like colonial America ain't going nowhere. I'm 8th grade social studies. It'll be there when I get back. But this is right now.
Yeah.
And I need to deal with right now, because if I'm affected by it, I can only imagine what they are. And so at this point, content will always be there. And I think sometimes as educators, we're so worried about making sure we get through the unit, and I gotta assess this, and K-prep's coming up and we gotta prepare them for this. But content will always be there. This moment may not always be there. And you have to capitalize on those moments and turn them into movements.
And every single day when the students come in, I verbally said out loud, we're going to set the table today. And in this classroom, we're going to laugh. In this classroom, we're going to forgive. In this classroom, I may say something that's going to harm you here. But in this classroom, we forgive. And so I think that has to happen very, very often, if not once a day, maybe twice or 3 times a day. Setting the table in your classroom or in your environment will most definitely play a part on how the day goes. And so will there be some uncomfortable conversations? Absolutely. Uncomfortable, but what? I would say uncomfortable, but respectful, right? Because your thoughts matter, right? Your thoughts matter in this classroom. I like to look at the classroom as a family. And so no more is it just academic. Now it's SEL, right? So we're now coming in with your emotions and your feelings. Give it a name, and it matters. So in this classroom, let's set the table every single morning of what we do in this space.
This particular stoplight prompt may be useful in helping students to express their level of comfort with the topic. Again, discomfort does not mean the subject is to be avoided. It means the teacher needs to remind students to understand why the conversation is important and why people find it uncomfortable. Another way of soliciting student comfort with the topic is to simply ask for them to hold up the number of fingers associated with their feelings. Consider all that we've talked about regarding conversations on race with students, and watch how this teacher is able to facilitate this productive discussion.
It's already hard enough for poor people in America.
My dad grew up poor and he went to college and got a good job. In America, anyone can be anything they want.
That's a great story about your dad. You should be proud of him, Amanda. But with that being said, unfortunately, not everyone has the same opportunities to get out of poverty. Sometimes some people are given advantages that others are not.
Like what?
What are you talking about? Like the fact that more black people go to jail for the same things that white people do when they don't go to jail.
No, I get that, but like, what does that have to do with working hard?
Wait. Let's think for a minute. Do you think your chances of going to college are good if you've been to jail?
No, probably not.
So that right there makes a difference. Even on job applications and college applications, they ask that one question: have you ever been convicted of a felony? So with that being said, what about your family? If your family is not allowed to live in certain places and afford nice houses, what about the schools?
But people can live wherever they want, right?
No, not necessarily. For years, there were policies and rules for keeping black people from moving into many neighborhoods.
So what we're talking about here is systemic racism. I'm going to say it again. Systemic racism, based on just a little bit of discussion that we had. This is what we're talking about. So I tell you what I want you all to do, because it sounds like your minds, your wheels, and your brain are starting to move. So I want you all to dig a little deeper. I want you all to Google systemic racism, because what you all have shared is just little examples of it. But I want you all to dig further for some deeper knowledge, and then we can come back together and talk more about it based on what you all have found out, okay? Okay, what are some examples that you found out about systemic racism, guys?
Well, black people make less money than white people doing the same job.
Okay, that's a good example. So how do you think that affects Black people as a whole?
If you don't make as much, you don't get to buy nicer things. And maybe you don't have the chance to send your kids to college.
Absolutely. So think about it. If you don't make as much money, if your parents don't make as much money, then they may not live in a nicer house. They may not have a nicer car. They may not be able to get, the things that they want or that your neighbor may have. They may not be able to have the opportunity to do that because they do not have the means, the income to do that. So with that being said, what else can we say?
Well, more Black people are more likely to get shot by the police than white people are.
That's a huge one, Mason. That's a huge one. So again, let's talk more about these things and how it's a part of our system and the society that we live in, guys. This is huge. This is a great start to a great discussion. We definitely want to dive more into it so we can get some more clarity about it. Okay.
Notice that the teacher facilitated the comments on systemic racism while not diminishing any. The students' opinions were validated, but at the same time, they were challenged to look beyond their own experiences. Then, after completing the process, the teacher allowed students to reflect and think critically around the topic before pushing the students deeper into the conversation.
Hey, Hannah, I really like what you've done with your journal entry. And I was just wondering if you had another question. You look like you had another one.
Yes, I do actually. So I saw on the news that people downtown are like rioting and stealing. I was wondering, why are they doing this?
Okay, good question. And I do think it's something that we should talk about. Just so happens that I was thinking about this very thing the other day, and I bookmarked a video. So I'm going to share my screen, and let's all watch this.
So I've been seeing a lot of things talking of the people making commentary. Interestingly enough, the ones I've noticed that have been making the commentary are wealthy Black people, making the commentary about we should not be rioting, we should not be looting, we should not be tearing up our own communities. And then there's been an argument of the other side of we should be hitting them in the pocket. We should be focusing on the blackout days where we don't spend money. But, I feel like we should do both. And I feel like I support both. And I'll tell you why I support both. I support both because when you have a civil unrest like this, there are three types of people in the streets. There are the protesters, there are the rioters, and there are the looters. The protesters are there because they actually care about what is happening in the community. They want to raise their voices, and they are there strictly to protest. You have the rioters who are angry, who are anarchists, who really just want and that's what they're going to do regardless. And then you have the looters. And the looters almost exclusively are just there to do that, to loot. Now, people are like, well, what did you gain? Well, what did you get from looting? I think that as long as we're focusing on the what, we're not focusing on the why, and that's my issue with that. As long as we're focusing on what they're doing, we're not focusing on why they're doing. And some people are like, well, those aren't people who are legitimately angry about what's happening. Those are people who just want to get stuff. Okay, well then, let's go with that. Let's say that's what it is. Let's ask ourselves why in this country in 2020, the financial gap between poor Blacks and the rest of the world is at such a distance that people feel like their only hope and only opportunity to get some of the things that we flaunt and flash in front of them all the time is to walk through a broken glass window and get it. That they are so hopeless that getting that necklace, getting that TV, getting that change, getting that bed, getting that phone, whatever it is that they're gonna get, is that in that moment when the riots happen and if they present an opportunity of looting, that's their only opportunity to get it. We need to be questioning that why. Why are people that poor? Why are people that broke? Why are people that food insecure, that clothing insecure, that they feel like their only shot, that they are shooting their shot by walking through a broken glass window to get what they need. And then people want to talk about, well, there's plenty of people who pulled themselves up by their bootstraps and got it on their own. Why can't they do that? Let me explain to you something about economics in America. And I'm so glad that as a child, I got an opportunity to spend time at Push where they taught me this, is that we must never forget that economics was the reason that black people were brought to this country. We came to do the agricultural work in the South and the textile work in the North. Do you understand that? That's what we came to do. We came to do the agricultural work in the South and the textile work in the North. Now, if I right now decided that I wanted to play Monopoly with you, and for 400 rounds of playing Monopoly, I didn't allow you to have any money, I didn't allow you to have anything on the board, I didn't allow for you to have anything. And then we played another 50 rounds of Monopoly, and everything that you gained and you earned while you were playing that round of Monopoly was taken from you. That was Tulsa, that was Rosewood. Those are places where we built black economic wealth, where we were self-sufficient, where we owned our stores, where we owned our property, and they burned them to the ground. So that's 450 years. So for 400 rounds of Monopoly, you don't get to play at all. Not only do you not get to play, you have to play on the behalf of the person that you're playing against. You have to play and make money and earn wealth for them, and then you have to turn it over to them. So then for 50 years, you finally get a little bit and you're allowed to play. And every time that they don't like the way that you're playing, or that you're catching up, or that you're doing something to be self-sufficient, they burn your game. They burn your cards. They burn your Monopoly money. And then finally at the release and the onset of that, they allow you to play and they say, okay, now you catch up. Now at this point, the only way you're going to catch up in the game is if the person shares the wealth, correct? But what if every time you share the wealth, then there's psychological warfare against you to say, oh, you're an equal opportunity hire. So if I played 400 rounds of Monopoly with you and I had to play and give you every dime that I made, and then for 50 years, every time that I played, if you didn't like what I did, you got to burn it like they did in Tulsa and like they did in Rosewood, how can you win? How can you win? You can't win. The game is fixed. So when they say, why do you burn down the community? Why do you burn down your own neighborhood? It's not ours. We don't own anything. We don't own anything. Trevor Noah said it so beautifully last night. There's a social contract that we all have, that if you steal or if I steal, then the person who is the authority comes in and they fix the situation. But the person who fixes the situation is killing us. So the social contract is broken. And if the social contract is broken, why the about burning the Football Hall of Fame, about burning the Target? You broke the contract when you killed us in the streets and didn't give a You broke the contract when for 400 years we played your game and built your wealth. You broke the contract when we built our wealth again on our own by our bootstraps in Tulsa and you dropped bombs on us. When we built it in Rosewood and you came in and you slaughtered us. You broke the contract, so Target, Hall of Fame. As far as I'm concerned, they could burn this ground. And it still wouldn't be enough. And they are lucky that what black people are looking for is equality and not revenge.
All right. So what are some of your takeaways from that video that we just watched?
Well, for me, it was pretty apparent that instead of being the majority of people rioting and breaking things, it was actually a smaller number, and that the majority was actually people just protesting the issue.
Okay. So why do you think that they're doing that? What makes somebody angry enough to want to protest?
They don't feel safe. People in their neighborhood keep getting shot.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, but there's still some people out there that are just rioting.
Yeah, I understand that, but protest is not about rioting. Even though slavery has been gone since, a long time, black people have never been able to catch on. It's because of the amount of racist policies out there.
All right, Cole, good point. And you clearly see that there are policies out there that discriminate against people of color. They've been around for a long time. So I think we need to ask ourselves now, what can we do to change those policies? So I'd like us as a class to do a little bit more research on this and come back and talk about it later.
Notice that the teacher in the situation directed the students to watch a video to provide evidence and context for protest, and then use that video as the catalyst for a conversation. The teacher also empowered the students to research and create narrative around their beliefs and not the teacher's own beliefs.
Okay, glad to see you all this morning.
Hey, Ian, what's with the Black Lives Matter shirt? Do you, hate the police or something?
No, this doesn't have anything to do with how I feel about the police. It's about believing that Black people's lives are in danger and something needs to be done.
Okay, guys, I know of a few articles that I'd like for you all to read about this. I think it's a really important issue, but I think we should talk further about it later after you guys look at those, okay?
After reading, the teacher initiates an honest conversation.
I hope that you guys had a chance to look at those articles I sent you yesterday. I'd like to have a conversation about them. Can anybody tell me what they thought about reading those articles or after reading those articles?
Black Lives Matter doesn't mean only Black Lives Matter.
But when they say Black Lives Matter, I say all lives matter, and they disagree.
Okay, well, Alex, I've heard you say in the past that you wanted to save polar bears because they're an endangered animal, right?
Yeah, so?
Okay, well, just because you say that you want to save polar bears, I don't think that that means you dislike all other animals or you don't care what happens to other endangered species. I think you want to save polar bears because you know they're at risk, right?
But they're hunting polar bears. Nobody's hunting down Black people.
But Black people are shot by the police more than twice as often as white people. And that makes me feel the need to say that Black Lives Matter, to make sure that people understand that this is unacceptable.
And Ian, do you hate the police?
I hate what is happening. I hate what I see the police do. But no, I don't automatically hate everyone that is a police officer.
But the Black Lives Matter people are going out and protesting against the police.
They are, but I think what they're saying is that they want people to hear them, and they want people to act, and they want people to stop what's happening to Black people. Think how you'd feel, Alex, if people that looked like you or that believed like you were being killed. You'd want something to be done.
Right. And when it's been going on for hundreds of years, the frustration really boils over sometimes.
Notice that the teacher did not get defensive or scold the students. The teacher simply had the students explore resources for more information and then facilitated a conversation. The students were led to identify their own biases and the roots of some racist thoughts. Furthermore, they confronted those thoughts in an open and safe environment, which allowed all students to be involved and voice their thoughts on the matter.
In your groups, you will need to select a person to fill each role. One stats person, 2 presenters to wrap what you've done, and a recorder. Remember to play to the strengths of each person.
You're gonna be the best at math, so you'll do stats.
I don't want to do stats. I want to be a presenter.
Well, the teacher said to use each other's strengths. You're gonna be the best at math. And Black people are better at rapping.
People aren't good at things just because of their race. That's racist.
It's not racist to think people are good at things.
Yes, it is. You only think that because of our race.
Right, but it's a good thing.
Well, sometimes we don't realize it, but we're being hurtful if we use stereotypes.
Like saying I'm good at math just because I'm Asian.
Right, but seems like a compliment to me. I wish I was good at math.
Ellis, do you think all Black people like rap? I know several Black students who don't listen to rap.
Okay, but most do.
I understand what you're saying, but let's think about it differently for a moment. You're on the basketball team, right? So some people might say that white people aren't good at basketball, that a black person should have your spot.
But I beat out most of the black students to make the team.
Yeah, that's the point. You had your chance to be on the team, but you're not giving me a chance because you think I'm better at something else.
We all have to realize that if we make assumptions about people based on things like their skin color, we're taking away their individuality.
What if people told Tiger Woods that Asian and black people aren't going to be good at golf and that he should do more math instead? He might never try to be a golfer.
I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone.
Ellis is my friend. I know he isn't racist, but sometimes people just say things and they don't realize it's racist.
Exactly. We have to keep in mind that someone doesn't have to be a racist to think and act in ways that are racist. We just want to be more mindful about everyone's individuality and not make assumptions based on their appearances.
We know that every conversation on race may not end with all students in agreement. It is important for students to learn about race, for teachers to have tools to facilitate conversations, and for all to speak their truths in a respectful and open environment. Students need a safe place to express their views with an opportunity to learn and grow from the perspectives of others.